How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nichol. And today, we are doing the ultimate backcountry boxer review. Now, a couple disclaimers right up front. We are not comparing any hunting clothing specific brands. Now, the reason that I did this is twofold. Number one, I wanted ease of accessibility, so whichever pair of boxers I ended up recommending, I wanted anybody to be able to get them or go try them on or have access to them if they so chose. Secondly, I find that most hunting clothing manufacturers are really fickle when it comes to their underwear model reliability. And this is an issue we're going to get into in more depth. But essentially, I find like every 1 to 3 years, they completely swap out their line of underwear for different types and styles. So just as soon as I find something that I like, when I go to re-up, either the sizing is completely different or the styling is completely different, and I'm right back at square one and I have no idea what the fit, function, and feel is gonna be like. So that's why you're gonna recognize most of the brands here. Some of them are a little more mainstream, some are a little focused on technical backcountry textiles, but for the most part, these are widely available brands. 4 main factors we're considering here when we look at all these. And that's fit, durability, smell retention, and drying time. I wore all of these boxers extensively over the past year. I've worn them hunting, I've worn them hiking, I've worn them training at the gym, I've worn them on long treadmill hikes. And most importantly, I've worn them across a series of repeatable circumstances. So there's this one particular training hike I do. It's 90 minutes long. I do it the exact same way every time. There's big sections of stairs, there's big downhill sections, and I made sure to wear all of the underwear at least a few times in very similar weather conditions on this trail so that I was really putting these underwear head to head in similar conditions. Now, the first thing we need to address is synthetic versus merino, because that is the first main decision you're gonna need to make when deciding which boxers you wanna buy. Traditionally, I have been a fan of merino. Over the last 18 months, I've switched pretty heavily to primarily synthetic for everything I run, and I'll get into why. But for most people, the only thing that's really gonna matter is that synthetic tends to dry quicker, but merino has better anti-smell properties. So you can wear merino for 7, 8, 9, 10 days and not smell like the Grand Funk Railroad. Whereas synthetic, and this is one of the points that I'd like to argue, typically older synthetics that were built with older technology, they really did trap some smell. I remember I used to tree plant 20 years ago, and polypro was like the big, synthetic material back then, and you would get a stink in those. It didn't matter how many times you washed them. You could use vinegar. You could use, borax. You could use all kinds of shit. Did not matter. Once a stink got in there, the stink was not coming out. So traditionally, synthetics have had better drying properties and merino has had better anti-smell properties. Now, something else is that merino should keep you warm when wet. However, I want to make a caveat with this that is particularly applicable to the boxer situations. In my experience, when the merino layer is so thin that it's essentially just a base layer, I find the thermal properties don't matter anymore. Because it's so thin, it's basically like just walking around with wet skin. And then essentially, if you're not aware of this, the reason that you get colder when you're wet is that water conducts better than air. So it evacuates heat away from your body faster than air does. So the theory has always been that because of the kind of layered property of merino on the molecular level, even when it gets wet, it doesn't compress. So it still keeps pockets of air, which keeps you warm even when the material is wet. The issue with that, though, is when you're dealing with something as thin as a pair of underwear or as thin as the base layer next to skin top, that layer is so thin that it really doesn't have those piling properties, and I find I'm just as cold. So not only do I stay colder than when I'm a synthetic, I find the merino dries much slower. This is pretty much the primary reason I've switched over to synthetics, is that I started doing hunts in colder, more wintry conditions. And I had a couple bad experiences where my base layers got wet and they just took forever to dry. I ran a synthetic the next day and it was a much more pleasant experience. So primarily that, but for some other reasons as well, I've decided to switch over primarily to synthetics. But again, there are good reasons to run Merino. And it's one of the main decisions you're gonna have to make right out of the gate, because some manufacturers only make a synthetic or Merino, and even if they make both, it's going to direct your attention to one or two of their models right away once you make that decision. Now, right out of the gate, I'm gonna talk about some issues that I had problems with almost all of the brands and some of the things that I look out for. One was that inconsistency of model from year to year, or too many models. There were some other brands I wanted to try, and even some of the brands I did try, like Saxx is a good example. You go on the website and there's literally like 40 different kinds of underwear, and the way that they're all described, it doesn't really lead to a super clear understanding of the differentiating properties of each pair. I prefer a simpler model, like 2 or 3 different styles within their kind of base layer selection. But ultimately, it didn't bother me so much if they had a lot of models. What I wanted to see was consistency. I wanted to see the same models year after year, because again, with the issue that I brought up with the hunting brands, nothing is more frustrating than spending the time and the energy and the research to land on a product that you really like, only to go back and re-up that product and it's gone. It's discontinued and they no longer make it. That's super frustrating. And the second issue is being able to find them physically in a store. So here's the deal. Right now I'm 6'1" and I'm 265 pounds, which actually sizes me out of a lot of these underwear. I have really big thighs. I like to lift. That's another story we don't need to get into right now. But it puts me at the upper range of almost all clothes. And so being able to go into a store and try things on is paramount, especially when you're looking at spending $50 for a pair of underwear. And so some of the brands that I wanted to try just weren't represented in a store that was local to me. And I live right in Vancouver. So if it's like it's in a store, I should be able to find it. But again, another thing like Saxx, for example, they have some really cool like training styles. And I couldn't find those anywhere in any stores. And I'm not just gonna randomly, because all of their models fit differently. That's another thing that's a huge pain in the ass with clothes, is that the sizing is not consistent between models. Like I got into that with Arcteryx. Like in one pair of their underwear, I was an XL. In a different pair of their underwear, I was a double XL. And it's like, they're boxers. How can you not provide some consistency of sizing? And the funny thing is, for my day job, I've actually done some work with large textile manufacturers, and not surprisingly, it's actually quite complicated when you start using different materials to get reliable sizing after things have been sewn and washed and prepped for sale and all that kind of stuff. But either way, just because it's difficult doesn't give you an excuse to not do it. And so, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that being able to find the models in store was one of my criteria, because I needed to have the ability to try them on before I bought them. Okay, here were the things that I like, or the things that I was looking for in a pair of good boxers. Flat lock seams. You will know these when you see them. They almost have like a figure 8 to them. They'll be maybe like a half a centimeter to a centimeter wide, and they're kind of loopy. And the seams, they're not sewn super tight. Like they almost look like it's a little bit loose, but that's what you want. That's a flat lock seam, and that's gonna cut down on chafing. Second thing, I like a mid-length boxer. I don't like them super short, right up by the gooch, and I don't like them coming all the way to the knee. I want them around 7 inches long. Now, the reason I do that is, like I mentioned earlier, I have pretty good quads. So if I can get a tapered leg opening that's long enough to get just over the sweep of my quad, that actually provides really good anti-riding properties, and the legs tend to stay down and grip my thighs, stop the chafing in between my quads, and then stop the boxers from riding up while I'm hiking. No bunching in the crotch or taint area. That was a real problem with 1 or 2 of these. So again, not just necessarily that the boxers ride up. I found just with the different styling, some boxers have more material in that crotch area. And then, so as you walk, it just kind of like bunches up in there. And I would get this like upper thigh, bottom crotch kind of chafe. And that was undesirable. So I'm looking for a proper fit and kind of tight all the way up into the crotch area. I'm looking for just the right amount of stretch. And I'm gonna get into that on a model by model basis, but how much the fabric stretches is really important. I want it to be comfortable, but I also want to feel supported. And same thing with my legs. I don't want bunchy fabric on my legs. I want it to be snug, but I don't want it to be so tight that I feel constricted. How fast they dry was really important. I tried on, for example, a pair of cotton boxers that were fantastic. They would be great for just day-to-day use, but obviously terrible wicking properties and terrible drying properties. So how fast they dry was a really important factor. And finally, as I mentioned at the opening of the video, how they responded to smell. Could I wear these things 3, 4, 5 times? Could I go on a hike with them and not wash them 3, 4, 5 times? And would they, obviously they're gonna get some odor to them, that's completely acceptable, but would it be a reasonable amount of odor? And would it come out quickly when I wash them, or would I have to do something special with like soaking in vinegar or something acidic to like get that broken down and get it out of there? So all the brands we tested were Arcteryx, Smartwool, Lululemon, Under Armour, Saxx, and Exofficio. Up first is Arcteryx. So Arcteryx is an extremely premium hiking and mountaineering brand. Their textile development is beyond reproach. So right out of the gate, the fabric itself was phenomenal. Amazing anti-scent properties, really quick to dry, really quick to wick. My main problem with these was the amount of stretch. So there was a little bit of stretch, but then it would like immediately hit this wall. And basically by the time I put them on, it was just too tight. And if I sized up, then they were too loose. So the thing is, they either need to have more intricate sizing, or they needed to add maybe another 15% of stretch to these so that they would have fit for my particular size. The other issue is that, and they have a welded flat lock seam. And so I'm willing to admit that this might have just been me, but I had a bit of chafing issue with some of these seams. And again, that could be because of the lack of stretch. If the boxers aren't stretching enough to ride your body in the appropriate places that they're supposed to, then the seams will end up out of line with where they should be. And that could be why I was getting the chafing issue. But loved the material, did not like the fit. Up next, Smartwool. So these were the one pair of pure merino that I tried. Before going through this whole experiment, I used to run primarily First Light merino boxers. They were really good for comfort. However, they switched models. This was one of my frustrations, and the newer models just never fit right, my body type. Now, I'm not even gonna bother talking about any of the positive characteristics. I wore these on 3 hikes and blew a hole, the size of a toonie in the crotch. So $50 pair of underwear couldn't make it 6 hours of hiking. Garbage, throw it out. I've had pretty bad luck with some Smartwool stuff. I will say their socks have held up really well, but I'm not overly impressed in general with Smartwool, especially the thinner Smartwool. And this could have something to do with their particular merino technology, but they don't do base layers very well, in my opinion. So Smartwool is a no-go, blew out after 6 hours. Under Armour. Now, I like Under Armour in general. However, really weird smell issues with some of their base layers and some of the materials that they use for underwear. Like they smell right out of the case, like right out of the box. You take them out and they got a weird scent to them, which I don't like. And ultimately, it was the lack of styling reliability. Like I don't even know what these ones are called. I wouldn't know how to find them again. I can't go on their site. They don't have any like unique naming or numbering convention. And it seems like every 6 months I go on there and they've got different underwear. So again, what's the point of finding something if you can't go back and buy it later on? So actually a pretty decent pair of underwear. I wear them to train in all the time. I like them, but a bit of a weird funk that doesn't have anything to do with me. And I would have no clue how to buy these again, so how could I even recommend them to you? All right, Exofficio. Now this one actually was recommended by Aaron Snyder, and I was able to find them on Amazon. And there's a lot of things I like about these. They're a slightly longer leg. They fit very snug. They're maybe 2 to 3% too tight, but that being said, they really stay in place, and they have a very strong kind of mesh feeling to them. But at the end of the day, I was never able to find them in my size again on Amazon, and the amount of shipping to Canada was outrageous. And the same thing, they had that model confusion, I think is the best way to set it. I couldn't find this exact model on a reliable basis. And although I like the material, it's a little bit scratchy. If you've ever worn any of the early generation Merino stuff, Kuiu was famous for this. It's very uncomfortable. I wouldn't say this is that uncomfortable, but it's heading in that direction. Like you can feel it on your skin. If you're wearing a pair of like quick dry hiking pants, you can hear it scratching on the inside. That's the other thing for hunting. I'm looking for something quiet. And I don't know, there was like a friction or like a texture issue with these. So fit and function, fantastic. Finding them, again, difficult. And some characteristics of the fabric I just didn't love. All right, getting down to the number one here. One more pair to go. Saxx. Now, Saxx has these nut-hugging pouches that feel really weird at first, but once you get used to them, they're actually really comfortable. I will say these are one of my favorite underwear for just casual day-to-day use. I really like them for that. I wasn't able to get a pair of their more technical underwear in my size. I couldn't do it. I tried MEC, I tried Sport Check, I went all over the place. And so these were just their regular cotton underwear. So listen, I can comment on the fit. I think they were great. Washability, styling, comfort, awesome. 10 out of 10. But because they didn't have any of the more technical, hiking or, workout style boxers, I couldn't actually put them through the paces because these are just cotton boxers and I'm not wearing cotton boxers into the bush. All right, and the number one contender, the brand that won out above everybody else. And if anybody's known me for more than a few years, you're gonna find this funny because I used to take the piss out of dudes who wore this brand. Lululemon. I gotta say it, man. Holy shit. Easily the best boxers I've ever worn in my life. Now, these particular ones are called Always in Motion Mesh. And these are the 7-inch variant. There's also a 5-inch variant, and there's also Always in Motion that are a different fabric, not the mesh. There are a couple other brands. They have another model that's newer called Built to Move that's specifically made for training, and they use the Luxstream fabric, which I really like. I have some other clothes that are made out of that, and I would like to try those, but I haven't had the opportunity yet. But let's just talk about these ones here in particular. Their textile development is just wild. And I know I'm kind of like fanboying over here over a pair of boxers, but for a guy who's got like big legs and is tall and it's like really hard to find, when you find something like this, you kind of freak out because of how perfect it works for you. I've worn these things 10 days straight in the backcountry. I've hiked with them every day. They've been wet, they've been cold, I've been hot. Here's the thing with like really high-end textile development. They have a way of making these feel supportive without being constrictive. They're the only underwear I own where like I don't think about the fact that I'm wearing underwear. Like I put them on and I go to the gym and it doesn't occur to me I don't have to adjust a bunch of shit down there. I don't have to worry about it riding up. I don't have to worry about chafe. Like it just works. The smell, anti-smell properties are fantastic. They're highly durable. Now they're not cheap, but if you buy them in 3 pairs at a time, $100, free shipping. I bought 4 pairs over a year ago, and I've been wearing those 4 pairs religiously every time I go to the gym, every time I go hiking, every time I go hunting, and there is zero wear and tear on any of the 4 pairs. So, I mean, that kind of says it all to me. If I can, even if they would only last 1 year, $100 for 3 pairs is worth it. And I did buy a solo pair. Let me clarify that. I bought 3 pair for $98, and I bought another pair for $38, so like $140. But if I was to do it again, I would just get 6 pairs for $200 and call it quits. You're good for underwear for the next 5 years. I guarantee it. And they do have the 5-inch variant, so if you're looking for something shorter, I highly recommend it. All right, that's it. I don't know how much more I can add. Lululemon, Always in Motion mesh, 7-inch long variant. Get the 3 packs, $98. I'm not sponsored in any way, shape, or form by any of these brands. I paid cash for all of these underwear. If you have any questions about any of the other brands that I tried, you can leave a comment down below, shoot me a DM on Instagram, or shoot me an email, j@mindfulhunter.com. There's a couple of other underwear reviews I would still like to do that are on my radar. One is a boxer comparison against all the major hunting brands, Sitka, Kuiu, First Light, and kind of do the same thing I did here, but only with hunting brands. And then I'd also like to do a winter version where I do a few long johns from some major manufacturers. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you own some Lululemon underwear, or if I've been persuasive enough today to send you out to the store to get some. Also, I will say their online service, amazing. I've never bought anything in a Lululemon store. Every single piece of gear of theirs that I own, I bought online. Free shipping, free returns, usually shows up in a day or two. It's wild. If you guys could take a moment and engage with the content, like, comment, share, subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, thanks for tuning in.